Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sackur. Jerusalem boasts one of the most bitterly contested pieces of real estate in the world, known as the Temple Mount to Jews, the noble sanctuary to Muslims. Jews aren't allowed to pray there. Many Jewish religious leaders say Jews shouldn't even set foot there. But that consensus is breaking down. My guest today is Yehuda Glick, a rabbi and activist who's been variously described as a dangerous extremist and a campaigner for religious freedom. 3 months ago, he survived an assassination attempt. Why does he persist with his divisive campaign on Jerusalem's holiest ground? Yehuda Glick in Jerusalem, welcome to Hard Talk.
Hello and shalom from Jerusalem.
Let us start with what happened to you on October 29th, 2014. A would-be assassin put 4 bullets in your body. What is your state of health today? Have you recovered?
I am in the process of rehabilitation. It's a relative compared to a person who was 4 bullets in his body. I'm doing pretty well. I thank God it was really had a lot of luck. I think I would say there were prayers. People from all around the world were praying for my health, and thank God God listened to those prayers, and my health is. I'm in the process of recovering, and in a very advanced stage, but still I have a way to go.
You're talking to me from a studio in Jerusalem at the moment, I believe, because you're still undergoing a lot of therapy. You're basing yourself in Jerusalem. I just wonder how safe you feel today. Do you have armed protection?
I'm based in Jerusalem. I'm physiotherapy, and my entire rehabilitation process is taking place in Jerusalem. But the threat to my life still exists till this very day, and the Israeli police keep me informed that that's the situation. But unfortunately, I am not protected officially. I have several volunteers who are armed, and every time I leave the house where I am living at, I make sure to be protected with an armed volunteer who accompanies me to wherever I go, even to this BBC studio.
I'm guessing, Yehuda Glick, that what happened to you wasn't entirely a surprise to you. I mean, you have been a controversial figure described by many Israelis, indeed many Israelis in government and in the security establishment, as a provocative figure and as an extremist for years. You've known that there have been threats upon you for years too. So this, though it was awful, wasn't really a surprise, was it?
Well, I knew there were threats on my life. Every single day on my Facebook page I received the threats. But until it actually happens to you, you don't really believe that it's going to happen. You don't really believe that a person who promotes human rights and is a person who is totally a law protector and a person who's totally involved in only legal activity and is a public activist, there's no reason in the world why he should be a threat. And his life should be under threat, and therefore, in a way, it was a surprise. Even though, I mean,
maybe if I may, sorry to interrupt, but maybe you're putting a little bit of a spin on your past. I mean, for many years now, you've devoted yourself to a campaign of advocacy all about the right of Jews to pray at what Jews call the Temple Mount, what Muslim Palestinians call the noble sanctuary. It's a deeply divisive issue. Your position has been very controversial, and I note that back in 2012, for example, we're talking more than 2 years ago now, nearly 3 years ago, a Jerusalem police commander, Israeli police commander, described you as, his words, the most dangerous man in the Middle East.
It is strange that a person who's involved in his entire campaign, it talks about human rights. And as a matter of fact, I am an extremist. I'm an extremist in my faith in democracy. I'm an extremist in my faith in human rights. I'm an extremist in my faith that people should respect one another. And if the Temple Mount is holy for billions of people around the world, I would say anybody who believes in the Holy Bible believes that the Temple Mount is the holiest place in the world. And it's 140,000 square meters. There's enough room for people to be of all kinds to pray. And the fact that one person holds a Bible in his hand or recites a prayer or recites a sentence from the book of Psalms, there's no reason in the world why that should cause others to be violent towards him.
Well, of course, there is a reason, because it contravenes the agreement upon which access to the Temple Mount is currently governed, an agreement which involves obviously the Israeli government, but the Islamic Waqf Authority and the Jordanian government as well. You have violated the rules in the past, and I come back to the point that an Israeli police chief dubbed you the most dangerous man in the world in 2012. I just wonder why that didn't give you pause, stop you, and make you think about whether the campaign you've been waging is not just in your own best interests, but in the best interests of your religious community and Israel as well.
It really is very unfortunate that people refer to people who are talking about human rights as somebody provocative, and where on the other side we see the Islamic extremists who deal not with, they're not talking, but are yelling and are actually violent, using violent and verbal violence, but not only that, and every single Jew who goes onto the Temple Mount is welcomed by violence of all kinds. I mean,
forgive me for laboring this point, but the police chief at the time, after an incident in which 11 of his policemen were injured, pointed the finger of blame directly at you, described your actions as provocative, and condemned you and your position. I just wonder why, now that you've suffered this assassination attempt, over years you haven't realized that what you are doing is not only just jeopardizing your own security, but contravenes everything that represents stability in a very divided city today.
Well, I could say that I'm very happy that things have changed in the past 3 years. More and more people in Israel understand that the situation in Temple Mount, that one religion takes over the place, which is sacrificed or sanctified for millions of people from around the world, Jews and non-Jews, and violently prevent any other prayer, is something that is intolerable.
For some people watching this who don't know the situation today, let us just lay it out in simple terms if we can. You know, the Temple Mount, as you call it, obviously is the site of the first and second ancient Jewish temples built by the kings, thousands of years ago. That matters deeply to you. It is also, right now, today, the site of the third holiest Muslim shrine, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's known as the Dome of the Rock, of course, generally the compound described as the noble sanctuary, deeply important to Muslims around the world. And the arrangement is, and has been for many years, that Jews do not go into the compound to pray and have limited, very limited access to the compound as long as they don't pray. Now, the Israeli government backs that. The Israeli rabbinical authorities back that and even go further and say, in their opinion, Jews should not go to the Temple Mount. What makes you think that you have the right to flout the clear views of the Israeli government and the establishment rabbinate?
I'm not going to go into the dispute among the rabbis. There are hundreds of rabbis who support the view that I am representing here. That's not the first thing in Jewish tradition that there are arguments among the rabbis, and I have nothing against any rabbi who refuses to go onto the Temple Mount. By the way, according to those rabbis, it's forbidden to go onto the Temple Mount not only for Jews but for non-Jews too. But there are 300 rabbis at least that today support my view, and therefore it's not a view of my personal view. It's an aspect of the way you learn Jewish tradition. But I'm for some reason
do you not recognize religious authority? Do you not recognize religious authority? The Sephardi chief rabbi, after you were shot, sent a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he said that he should be very careful of these rabbis, including, I would believe, people such as yourself, who in his view were adding fuel to the fires of incitement.
So that is his view, and he's right to have his view. The Ashkenazi chief rabbi came to visit me in the hospital, and his view was different. And the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Israel has put down into the government, waiting for a decision, have put down criteria for Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. So, as you say, the aspect of what we are dealing with right now is controversial in Israel, and there are different opinions. But once again, I'm right now, what I'm representing, and I do it, and that's what I'm representing is human rights. The temple, I have nothing against Muslims who are praying on the Temple Mount. I have nothing against them, and I respect them. And I just think that just the same way that Muslims have a right to pray on the Temple Mount, Christians have a right to pray on the Temple Mount, and Jews have a right to pray on the Temple Mount. And I'll tell you beyond that, I'm an official Israeli tour guide, licensed Israeli tour guide, and I can tell you that millions of Christians who visit Israel every single year don't come to visit Israel because the Tel Aviv beach is the most beautiful beach in the world, but they come to visit Israel because it's the only place in the world where they can open the Holy Bible and they can walk in the footsteps of Abraham, King David, etc., etc. And they come to wherever they go, they're walking with their Holy Bible in their hand. And when they get to the Temple Mount, suddenly, if they're caught with a Holy Bible in their hand, it's confiscated. This situation is intolerable. And
I hear what you are saying, but I just want to be plain about how far you take. If I may, I want to be plain about how far you take your argument. You put it forward to me as though all you really care about is the principle of religious freedom. You want that compound area to be a happy place of interfaith dialogue and tolerance. But many people listening to your words over many years think that you go much further than that. You and your associates in, if I can put it this way, the Temple Mount movement are saying many other things as well. For example, in the last few days, one of your closest political allies, Moshe Feiglin, has once again been saying that Israel must impose its sovereignty over the temple, as you call it, the Temple Mount complex. Do you support that position?
The history has proven that the only government that has really led to tolerance to other religions has been the Israeli government. When the Muslims ruled over Israel, they took down, demolished churches. When the Crusaders were here, they took down mosques. The only government that has been tolerant to other religions has been the Israeli government.
Right. So when Palestinians say that your movement is about much, if I may, when Palestinians say your movement is about much more than just the right to pray, they're right. You're confirming that to me, and indeed you go further, don't you? I mean, many of the people that you associate with actually say that a third Jewish temple must be built on the site currently occupied by the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Do you support those associates of yours who take that position?
Well, let's do it one by one. We're talking about the Israeli sovereignty. Ever since 1967, the Temple Mount is under Israeli sovereignty. That's been the situation since 1967, and what people are talking about is that the Israeli government should impose its sovereignty, meaning they should allow Jewish presence on the Temple Mount without the fact that every single Jew who goes onto the Temple Mount is under threat of violence, and I think that is legitimate and much more than that. And
can you just give me some straight answers to straight questions, Yehuda Glick? Do you right now advocate, along with many of your associates, for example, the housing minister Uri Ariel said the other day, he said the Al-Aqsa Mosque should be replaced by the third Jewish temple as it was built. That is, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built on the holiest place in all of Israel. Do you share his view?
Let's put things straight again. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the southern part of the plaza. It has nothing to do with the location of where the temple was, and that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. What you're talking about is the Dome of the Rock, and let's put it this very simple. Building a temple is not something that can be done by any private person, and a temple is not another piece of real estate that somebody can go ahead and build. Right now, I have nothing to do with building a temple. Right now, I'm talking about, and this is what the organization I am part of is called the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation, and we deal with the Temple Mount as a place which should be the world center for religious tolerance.
You've been a former leader of the Temple Institute. As I understand it, the Temple Institute's official position is that a third Jewish temple should be built on that ground. Am I wrong?
Every religious Jew prays daily for the building of a third temple, and that is part of the prayer. The same way the return of the Jewish people to their homeland is part of the prayer. The question is whether it should be who should do that.
Exactly. The question is whether Jews today in Israel have a duty to act as agents of the delivery of that third temple, or whether you leave it to fate. And what's your answer to that?
My answer to that is very simple. Just the same way the establishment of the State of Israel was something that was decided by the United Nations, building a temple is not something that any private organization can do, and any Jew, as important as he is not in charge of building the temple. The temple will be built whenever it will be built, whether it's another 50 years, another 100 years, I don't know, but it should be something that is international. It should be a house of prayer for all nations. And unfortunately, this is what I deal with. I don't deal today with the temple. I deal today with the Temple Mount, and I think this is very important to emphasize.
But
what I'm preaching is for human rights on Temple Mount, and I don't. And in what world? In what world is somebody who talks about human rights considered provocative?
Yeah, but you talk about human rights, but in some contexts you talk about very different things as well. I remember reading a piece in Haaretz, again a couple of years ago, which described a meeting you chaired of different elements within the Temple Mount movement, where the reporter described that the biggest dominant poster as she entered the room was a poster of the late Meir Kahane, who most Israelis, I think, would say was an extremist and a racist, but a man who you apparently felt fit to put in a big poster at the heart of your meeting, and where there were many people in the room, as described by the reporter, who were advocates of building a third temple in today's Jerusalem.
Again, I'm very unfortunate that the reporter took that story. As soon as she walked into the room, I immediately pointed out that with the location of the meeting taking place in a room that we had rented, we had no idea who put up the poster there, and the poster had nothing to do with the meeting. And it was very unfortunate in my eyes that she decided to mention that poster. That was really, I think that was not fair. It had nothing to do with the meeting that was taking place there.
Well,
the meeting that was taking place, and I am not in charge, and I am not responsible for people's what their thoughts are and what their reasoning is.
You see, if I may, I understood you made that point. If I may, the point about Meir Kahane, and maybe even about politicians like Moshe Feiglin, is that they believe that Palestinians should be removed from both the territory of Israel 48 borders, but also from the West Bank as well. Meir Kahane also was known to use violence. You have one outstanding court case against you because in August, long before you were shot, you had an altercation with a female security guard in the compound area. You are alleged to have pushed her so forcibly that she fell over and broke her arm. And the Jerusalem police have now sought a court order banning you from any contact with that compound area until the court proceedings are finished. So there are real question marks about your own commitment to peaceful activity on that compound.
Anybody who knows me, and I have guided tours of the Temple Mount in the past 25 years, more than thousands of tourists and Israelis have been guided by me, and everybody who knows me knows that I have nothing to do with any kind of violence, any kind of breaking the law, and there's nothing to do with, there's no connection whatsoever between me and any kind of violent behavior, not even verbal. I don't curse anybody, I never yelled at anybody, I've definitely never pushed anybody, and I'm sure that will be taken care of in court. The situation is actually the opposite. So far, until now, I have sued the police for banning me without any excuse, and the police were obliged to compensate me for banning me forcefully from the Temple Mount. So I don't think we should go into that. The story that you're talking about right now is being dealt today with the Israeli court, and I'm sure it will be proved that it's false. Anybody who knows me, and thousands of people know me, know that I preach only for non-violent behavior, for keeping the law, and for following every single one of the instructions of every single policeman on the Temple Mount. And that has been my history throughout the past 25 years that I've been visiting and guiding on the Temple Mount.
Before we end, Rabbi Glick, let's just think of a bigger context here. The defense minister in Israel has called those who make high-profile Jews, who make high-profile visits to the Temple Mount, he's called them provocative. We know there is extraordinary Palestinian anger right now, not only over issues concerning the Temple Mount, but the massive growth of Jewish settlement activity inside East Jerusalem, also the inability of Palestinians in the West Bank to travel into East Jerusalem to pray at Al-Aqsa. So much anger, and you appear to be deliberately provoking and intensifying that anger.
Stephen, I really refuse to accept what you have just said right now. There is no justification in the world for any kind of violence. And what you are doing right now is trying to justify violence. Just like the victim of rape is not to be blamed for the behavior of the rapist, and just like a person who says, I never beat up my wife unless she deserves it. Every person who is violent always tries to justify it.
Yeah, the only problem is that you're blaming me. I'm actually just quoting the Israeli defense minister and indeed many other Israelis in government and indeed in the rabbinate too, who accuse you of provocation and incitement.
I don't know when the last time you spoke to the Israeli defense minister was. I spoke to him last night, and we were very friendly, and as a matter of fact, he strongly encourages our visits to the Temple Mount, and he knows me personally, and trying to blame our behavior, which is totally legal, as provocative, is very annoying and very disturbing, and there is no reason in the world that you should be part of justifying violence. There is no reason in the world that every Jew who goes onto the Temple Mount should be a victim of violence, and a person talking about human rights and freedom and respect to others should be called provocative. And those who are violent, you are here, Stephen from the BBC, is trying to justify their behavior.
So I talked about context. What you're saying to me is that whatever the context, however likely it is that you will add fuel to the fires that currently burn in Jerusalem, you are just going to intensify your campaign.
I refuse to accept that blame. I do not put any fuel to the vice versa. I've tried, and I've not only tried, I have dialogues with moderate Muslims who support our activity. Unfortunately, the Muslims around the world and in general, and in Israel also, have decided that their leadership, the Islamic leadership, should be very, very fundamental and very encouraging for violence, and this is something we should be very sorry for. And as a matter of fact, I would expect the BBC and I would expect the entire modern world and in a civilized society to condemn violence and to protect those who are talking and not only talking or acting in a way which is anti-violent and in a way which talks about things that are very basic in a modern society, and that is human rights, and that is respect to one another and freedom to pray for all.
All right, Yehuda Glick, we have to end there, but thank you for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you.